One of my most controversial opinions is that I hate the High Lords of Westeros. And I don't just mean the controversial houses like the Lannisters, the Freys, or the Boltons. I mean every single one. Every single one. I hate the Karstarks. I hate the Umbers. I hate the Blackwoods, the Brackens. I hate the Mallisters. I hate the Swans. I hate the Selmies. I hate the Tullys, the Glovers. I hate the Danes. I hate the Baratheons. I hate the Lannisters. I hate the Targaryens. I hate every single High Lord in Westeros because they all serve the same function. They are all agents of the state. And what that means is that they all serve the king, and they are all meant to enforce the king's will onto the people in probably the most negative ways possible. They are there to essentially force the people to kind of be held to the king's will. They pay the taxes, and if they fail to pay taxes, they are going to be met harshly and punished by the states. Look at the defiance of Duskendale, where they decided that they weren't going to pay taxes, and of course they kidnapped King Aerys, but they still killed every single person in Duskendale. Like, they wiped out the ruling house, which, I'm not that opposed to them wiping out the house. I don't like the High Lords. Now, of course, I do want to differentiate between each High Lords. Of course, I'm going to hate one house more than I hate the other house. Of course, I don't hate the Starks as much as I hate the Lannisters, because the Lannisters enforce their will more negatively onto the people. You see that Tywin Lannister is not a just man, while Ned kind of acts as some form of justness. However, he still upholds his own personal sense of justice onto his people. You see that we know that he executes people. He executed the deserter of the Night's Watch because he believed that breaking your oath is the worst thing you can do. Although this man's broken his oath once, at least the realm believes that he's broken his oath before. So why should we trust his word? At least if I was a small folk, I would think that that's a little rich coming from him. I mean, he is talking about how oaths are so important, and the reason why he killed the member of the Night's Watch is because he broke his oath, even though he's famously the guy that broke his oath. He's the guy that fathered a bastard. But more importantly, he's the tax collector of the North. He's the one that essentially goes around. He is supposed to inspire loyalty, but he is there to make sure that the small folk pay their taxes. He is there to make sure that they give the state money. And if they don't give the state money, he is the one that is going to raise up arms and essentially force them to pay taxes. And one of the reasons why people support taxes is that, oh, you pay taxes to support the armies to protect you. But my question is, what is there to protect you from? It's the other lords. It's the other lords doing whatever the hell they want, thinking that they can get away with it because they have the power to do so. So I suppose what this entire video is trying to get to saying is that the systems in which the Westerosi nobles operate under is an inherently flawed and corrupt system. We see that it allows them to kind of operate as they are above the law. We see that Gregor Clegane is allowed to essentially kill and murder whoever he wants because he has the authority to do so by by being a part of Tywin Lannister's kind of like entourage. He is Tywin Lannister's dog, so he is allowed to do whatever he wants. We see this with Sandor Clegane. Typically, to be a member of the Kingsguard, you have to be a knight. But the Lannisters wanted Sandor Clegane to be in the Kingsguard. They didn't want Barristan Selmy there, so they broke two of the most profound traditions just to get essentially their dog on the Kingsguard. And another instance of these noble lords kind of just enforcing their own will onto the people is the War of the Five Kings. We see this throughout the Arya chapters where she is visiting the Riverlands, and no matter which side the River Lords choose, their small folk are dying. They are dying throughout the entire series. We know of one instance where there's this one person who their lord swore fealty to House Lannister and House Baratheon of King's Landing, and yet all their small folk all died. I believe it is a Tyrion chapter where he's at court, and someone said that a lord came in saying that, oh, I pledged for Joffrey, yet they still killed all my small folk. And he wasn't outraged at the fact that his small folk were dead. He was just asking for new people. He was asking for new hands to essentially farm his land, which is outrageous. Personally, if I was in charge of these small folk and they all died, I'd personally shoot Joffrey in the head with the crossbow. I would be furious, but this lord doesn't care. He only sees the small folk as a means to get production. He sees them as a way to an end to become more powerful and more infamous. Another great instance is it is the Red Wedding. Now, when we think of the Red Wedding, we just think of Robb getting executed, but thousands of normal people died at the Red Wedding purely for political reasons. Tywin kind of allowed the Freys and the Boltons to do this because he wanted Robb dead. But if you were just a man at arms for the Umbers, not the Karstarks, but like the Umbers, but like if you were part of the Umbers or the Pipers or like a Mallister or Bracken or Blackwood, and you're just a person, your lord called you to fight, and then you decide to fight, you go to the wedding, and then you die purely because these rich people wanted an enemy gone. So you were just a casualty. You were just an accident. You know, you're just a statistic to the report on how many died to get Robb out of the way. And I think this leads to another important distinction, is that we have a character who's antithetical to these High Lords. We have characters who truly do care about the small folk. But the problem is, the characters that do care about the small folk still operate in a way that harms the small folk, except for one person. Daenerys Targaryen is opposite of everyone. She does not operate under the typical Westerosi standard, I would say. Now, she does still adopt this kind of feudal, monarchical system where she is the queen and she enforces her will. But she does seem to give more power to the people. For instance, Daenerys's kind of people at court, her advisors, are made up of one, like former nobles and marine, but they're also made up of former slaves who now lead her sellsword company. For instance, Missandre's brother leads a sellsword company, and he is one of her advisors. It is mentioned that she has 3 sellsword companies that are all made up of former slaves. She also, we see instances of her bringing in people to hear like claimants and complaints. Now, this doesn't seem to be relatively unusual in Westeros, but Daenerys is the only person that we see directly doing this, besides, I think, Ned Stark. So it is something that is kind of unorthodox to the reader, but maybe not necessarily the people of like Westeros or Essos. But I would like to talk about characters that kind of function in a way that harms the small folk, while also somewhat caring about the small folk. So Ned Stark and Stannis Baratheon do seem to be the most obvious people when it comes to this category. We know that Ned Stark is seemingly an honorable man. He cares about honor and duty and doing what's right. But he still harms the small folk, I'd say, because of his form of taxation. Now, this video is, if there's one thing you take away from this, it's that I don't like this taxation, because ultimately it doesn't really lead to anything meaningful for the small folk. Most of the time, I approve of taxation. I do like it, because in the modern day, that goes to fund things like roads, healthcare, education, but we really don't know what the people that are getting taxed, no, we know what it funds. It funds the mirrors carpets in King's Landing. It funds all these rich paintings and artifacts, and it funds the wars and the foods. Like, think about when King's Landing is starving. What is the king eating? He's eating rich food. While the people were starving, Joffrey had a 77 course meal, while some of the people were still eating. They were eating other humans. But to Ned Stark's dismay, at least he doesn't really seem to be living a lavish lifestyle. Winterfell seems to be like nice, but it doesn't seem to be over the top extravagant like King's Landing. But we never hear any reports of the taxes being used for anything good. Like, he doesn't talk about like funding schools or distributing grain to the people. But we know he collects taxes. He says that he goes around to like the hill tribes and he talks to them and he inspires their loyalty. but he still operates under the system where the small folk have to obey just random people. These people do not have any merit to make them good at ruling, so many of them can be cruel and weak and lead to unjust suffering. And I'd say Daenerys kind of is different to this because she doesn't really have this hierarchical standard. She kind of gets rid of it when she invades Marine, and like the although she still kind of does subscribe to that notion because she believes that she deserves to rule Westeros purely because her father was king. But I don't know. I feel like my hatred of these lords purely comes from my modern day viewpoint. So I suppose if I were to look at this from a different perspective, I could find a way to not dislike these people. And my disliking isn't even to say that I don't like the characters, more just if I were to be in this universe, I would hate all of them. And perhaps I'm repeating myself, but the real reason why I hate the lords is not because they are cruel or too cunning or even if they don't care about the small folk. That's not why I hate them. I hate them because they are all just cogs in the system that keep the people down. They are all tools of the king to make sure that the small folk are doing what he wants. And honestly, I think I would love the lords a lot more if the taxes actually went to doing something. The only time that we see taxes being used appropriately is in the reign of Jaehaerys, because he actually uses the taxes to like make the drinking water more clean in King's Landing. He makes the King's Road, the Rose Road, the Gold Road, so he makes travel a lot safer. But when we look at Robert and Ares and Aenys and Maekar, what do they do that actually makes the lives of the small folk better? The only thing that Robert really did was not have a war break out in 16 years, and even that he failed to do it because of the Greyjoy Rebellion. So his greatest accomplishment was doing nothing. But when we look at what he spent his taxes on, he spent it on feasts and tourneys and fine mirrors carpets and arbor wine. The crown is like millions of dragons in debt, and the small folk they haven't done anything wrong. So why is it that they are being punished purely because of one man's misspendings? And I think this goes for every single lord. They reap the benefits of what the small folk sow. It is the small folk who are out there planting the crops and making the wine, but it is the high lords who manage to profit off of their work. We see that they are the ones that are rich. They are the ones that can afford nice wines and they can afford plate for their sons, while the small folk are lucky if they have enough food for wintertime. So that really just goes to show that each lord doesn't truly care about the small folk. Even the greatest of lords has nothing but maybe an apathetic pleasure towards them. They have maybe a sense of a parent-child relationship where they think that they're just inherently smarter or better than the small folk, so it's their job to protect them. But I mean, look at Ned Stark. He has food all throughout wintertime. He is lucky enough to have a meal to eat. He is lucky. He has a castellan. He has a septon and a maester to train his kids. But the small folk have none of that because they are too busy farming to put food on Ned's table and paying his taxes so he can afford the maester and the septon and the castellan and all the hunting and the feasting that he does, although very little feasting is done. So to put it into this video, to just summarize everything that I've said, I don't like the High Lords because they are part of the system that keeps the small folk down. They repeatedly tax the small folk, although not much is done to benefit them. The only thing that they offer is protection from other lords. So if we removed all lords from existence, the small folks' lives would actually improve as they would pay less taxes. So that's going to end this video. If you disagree, which I assume almost all of you are, there's going to be a lot of Stark and Lannister and Targaryen fans in the comments, but feel free to mention that in the comments down below.